Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we'll be going over some high-level mechanics and some concepts that are needed to reach some high scores in 3D Mark. Specifically, we'll be building the 0SL no-bin world record PC. This was created by a community member named Mars on the Discord channel, and the specifics of this build is that it can be built by anybody if you just put in those parts that I will later specify, and you set them at the right clocks and voltages, it will just work. So anybody can build this without any other knowledge than what will be explained in this video. And this build will assume that it has 0 SL and that you don't want to bin for parts, and it is the highest possible within those constraints. I will also explain these concepts and a lot more. We have a lot of talking points, so let's get to it. So what is SL? First and foremost, SL is silicon lottery, which is a mechanic that governs the voltage tolerance and temperature tolerance for all parts, but in particular CPU and RAM and GPU is where it matters. So this is a percentage that can go from 0% to 5%, and it will be a multiplier to their voltage tolerance and by extension their temperature tolerance. And the higher this SL for a specific part is, the higher the score it can get if you overclock it properly. For this build we are going with 0 SL, so we're going to assume that the parts have the worst possible quality, but we're still going to overclock them as best as possible within that 0 quality. Okay, so I mentioned that this is a no-bin build. What does binning mean? Binning is the process of swapping out parts just to find ones that have higher tolerances, so higher SL score. This is to optimize the build for higher scores. If we're going with a 0 SL build, obviously there is no binning required. The first part we put in will just work. And of course I mentioned that this is a world record. This is sort of an unofficial world record. The official world records can be checked out at the site that I provide in the description. It is a site made by another community member, and it also hosts an extension that you can use to upload your scores to this site, and this is considered by the community as sort of an unofficial high score table. And this score is currently not on it, but the absolute maximum scores are, which are, as mentioned here in my notes, 43,467 is the absolute maximum score that somebody has actually reached and put on the high score, and it is also theorized that this is the current maximum possible in the game without using bugs. While I will mention this score of 42,312, which is the maximum score attainable with a 3090 RTX card, because the high score is actually not done with this card. It is done with another card that behaves quite weirdly and thus provides a better score. But the absolute maximum you can reach with a 3090, again without using bugs, is 42,312. I mentioned this score because I am the current holder of this high score. So yeah, this is a high score that is not on there yet as of making of this video, but this is also a score that anybody can reach if they just put together this PC I will show you. So you can play along as I explain things and build a PC while I explain it, or just watch the video, build it afterwards. Yeah, so what preparation do we need to make? we need to choose a game mode and a workshop. First and foremost, I am going with IT expansion because this is a game mode where all parts are unlocked from the beginning, just like in the esports expansion, but esports feels a little more restricted to me, so I'm going with IT. And for workshop, I'm just using the IT expansion second workshop, simply because this can host the most picker rigs on the shelves. So yeah, levels and money are two considerations that you have to prepare in advance too. For this build you will need about 13,000, well 10,000 if you build it correctly to begin with, but about 13,000 should be enough, which actually is a lot in the basic career mode, so we're not using that. You will also need all the parts unlocked, for which in the basic career mode you need to be at maximum level of 34 and filled bar of XP. So again, another reason why we're not using career mode. In IT expansion we already have all the parts from level 1. We don't have the money, but we have the mechanic or the rigs, which can produce you at least about 80,000 bucks per week. So there's no reason not to use and abuse that. And we'll also need some tools and software, which we can get from the shop in the tools and software category. Basically, we want to buy everything here. Like, we'll need a custom water cooling shop, we'll need a quick screw, we won't need part tanking, but we'll have, if you're playing in IT expansion mode, we'll have all the money we need, so we might as well just buy everything. We will not be using auto cable and which one is the other one? I guess the quick cable, because these are tools that plug cables in automatically for us, and that is actually not good for us. And I'll show you why when we get to the radiator installing. So we buy all these tools, we go into the menu and tool upgrade options. We just tick them all except for auto cable and quick cable. And with that, if you have enough money, we have all the parts unlocked and workshop ready and to go, tools ready, all the software we will need. Basically it's just OCCT, GPU tuner, yeah, and 3D Mark, which is already available by default. If we have all this, we can get started. So we start by shopping in the basic shop. Let's choose a case first. For any kind of extreme scores, extreme overclocking, we will want the Rain Tech, I'm not gonna type that out, Enyo case. So what's special about this case? 4 things in particular. One is that it hosts the most radiator spots. Like, it writes here that 4 times 120 and 3 times 140. That's a gross underestimation of the amount of radiators it can hold. It can actually hold 4 radiators of 480 length, which is the biggest radiator in the game. It can hold 4 of those and an additional 360 length radiator, which is just basically the length of 3 120 fans. So this can hold the most radiators. For this build in particular, we don't need the most efficient cooling, but we do need a lot, and it's just good practice to have as much as we can, so we don't have to bother with that. Most of the time, cooling is not an issue, voltage will be, but I'll explain these later. So this is reason number 1. Reason number 2 is it's just all made of glass, so you can see everything through it. It's just nice to see that every fan is spinning, every part is working. Everything that lights up is essentially working, and this is a good way to have a quick overview of what's working and what's not. The third reason, and this is quite important, is that the Enyo has a cooling factor of 0.5. This is a background variable, and we'll be talking a lot about this background variables, but in essence this means that the other background variable called case cooling will be much more effective, much lower. And this case cooling variable for air-cooled builds is very important, but even in water-cooled builds it governs how the cooling of the temperatures of the GPU and the temperatures of the CPU interact with each other. So with the annual case, this is a problem that's slightly less of a problem. And of course, if you're doing air-cooled builds, it is extremely important, and this is an important reason why we use the annual. There are other cases that use this cooling factor of 0.5, specifically the open bench tables, and the Pyan cases uses a 0.75 factor, so they're also pretty good, but these didn't have none of the cooling capability of the annual. These are way worse when it comes to cooling, even if it's just an open case. The way the game calculates it will be worse. And the fourth reason we'll explore later. Okay, so power supplies. Oh yeah, we want to actually buy this annual. Okay, add it to cart. So power supplies. For power supplies, the best possible in the game is 1600. And there are 4 of these, and it does not matter which one we choose. It would matter with other cases because the length requirement, but in the annual these all fit, so it doesn't matter which one we choose. I just like the Corsair one, so I'll put that one in. We want as much wattage from these power supplies as we can, because even though most builds just under the 1.5 minutes that a 3D Mark assessment runs does not ramp up more than about 1050 watts. If you want to run OCCT for a prolonged period of time, we will need as much wattage as we can. Luckily, we have these 1600 watt power supplies, which is mostly enough for everything we want to use it for. So motherboards have several visible variables like the socket type and the multi-GPU capability, which are very important, and also various hidden variables that will be important for this build. Let's go over the visible ones. For visible ones, we just want RGB because we always want RGB. We want the socket to be AM4 because we will be using a Ryzen processor. We want multi-GPU capability with at least SLI. If it's Crossfire or SLI, it's the same thing. It's okay. We don't care about the max RAM speed. I'll explain this later when we come to memory. And then we care about the hidden variables, which are RAM steps, which are pre-programmed steps in which the RAM can be set if it's slotted onto this motherboard. We can check this in the game, but it's much more effective to check this in a spreadsheet. Luckily, we do have such a spreadsheet. I will link it below. It's Snakeman's very handy parts and unlocks spreadsheet, and you can find all these hidden variables there. So RAM step is one important factor. For this specific build, we want a motherboard that has the RAM step of 2667, because that's what we'll be using. Then there are headers for fans, radiators and reservoirs. Most motherboards have a header count of between 2 to 5, and we want a motherboard with at least 4 but possibly 5 headers, so we can plug in everything and even have an RGB CPU block. This is a hidden variable. It is not really a variable since it's programmed with the motherboard's graphics, sort of. So this isn't something that you can check with from a spreadsheet. You will have to experiment with this or rely on other people's findings. And the other hidden variable is the M.2 slots and M.2 slots that can have heat sinks. This can be checked in the table. A bit unreliable because here there is also a factor of the M.2's size that isn't shown anywhere, so this is also something that you will need to experiment around with a bit. In essence, what we want is an M.2 that has a heatsink, and for that we want a motherboard that has a slot for M.2s with heatsinks. And I have prepared here the LAS ROG B550 Pro 4, yeah, this is it. So we will be using this one. This has the RAM step of 2667, this has 5 headers, this has M.2s that can fit, M.2 slots that can fit heatsinks. It's an AM4 motherboard and it has SLI capability, that's all we need. So we add this one to the cart too, and we move on. CPU, the brain of the PC. For this one we will need a Ryzen 5 9550X. This is the best CPU at lower clocks, and we are in essence doing a lower clock. This is not an overly extreme overclocked build. This build will use clocks that are all within the safe limits of CPU, RAM and GPU, so that it won't burn, it won't cause blue screens. These are safe values, so this is a lower, this can be considered as a lower overclock. So in this category the 5950 just blows everything out of the water. For more extreme overclocks we would actually be using Threadripper 3960X. It's again the same kind of weirdness as with the GPU, that it's a slightly older, slightly weaker version, but due to how the game computes stuff, it will perform the best. And for the Threadripper 3960X, I just marked this down here. For the most possible CPU score, you will want to have 4884 megahertz. So this is the best possible score for a CPU. At least this overclock will reach the best possible score for a CPU. Of course, overclocking is also reliant on memory. We'll cover that in a minute. But regarding CPU, what we want is a CPU that performs good, but still within its safe voltages. And safe voltages is also something that the game tells you not to raise the voltage of a CPU over, I don't know, 1.5 I think, but 1.7 is always safe. So we will be using 1.7, and some CPUs have a higher safe voltage. You can check this again in the spreadsheet that I link below, made by the same community member Mars, and it hosts all the safe CPU clocks and the safe CPU voltages, so you can go based on that if you don't want to do any binning. So next up comes the random access memory. What we want is high frequency first and foremost, but not really the way the shop gives it to us. So the most the shop has is RAMs with 4800 megahertz. There are a lot of these recently added mostly, but what we want is the original G-Skill Trident Z 4GB, 4800 MHz RAM. This has the best parameters for overclocking. Again, temperatures with RAM are not a thing, but voltage is pretty much the same issue as with CPUs, so you want to use safe voltages. The game will tell you that it's 1.7, in practice it's 1.8. So you will always want to set the CPU voltage to at least 1.7. It has no drawbacks, only benefits. And same thing with RAM, you always want to set RAM at least to 1.8 volts. Another important thing is that we will need 2 of these. Oh, I forgot to add something to the card, yeah, the CPU. Let me just quickly add that. 595X. Yeah, so we have case, power supply, motherboard, CPU, and now we have 2 RAMs. Yeah, we want 2 of these because memory basically raises the CPU score attained in 3D Mark, and it can raise it by a huge margin, but only if multiple memory channels are used. So you don't want one RAM with a big size, you want multiple RAMs with smaller sizes or higher performances in essence. The size doesn't matter at all, forget the size. It doesn't matter what size you use, the specific models have specific tolerances for voltages, and that's what you need. This is the model with the best tolerance, so this is what we will use. And 2 of these because the memory channels, I'll show you how to check these later on, but these are tied to the CPU, so each CPU has a fixed number of memory channels that it can use, and the 595X can use 2. The 3960X in comparison will use 4 of these. Trident Z's, and for the extreme overclock version you will be overclocking these to 6313 MHz. So that is the complete version of the extreme CPU overclock. Basically, if you're not doing that, you're not doing extreme overclocking. For GPU it is variable, for CPU it has long been calculated that this is the best possible overclock reachable. It will reach a score of 19,994. For this build we are obviously not doing such a high overclock because this requires heavy binning, this requires SL scores of like over 4.9%, so high 95th percentile. So we're not doing this one, we're doing a 0 SL score, and the best we can do is 18,377. It will still do over 60 FPS in the test, so it's still good. Okay, so we added the memory, and then the last thing we need to buy here is the drive, the storage device. Now we could use a normal hard drive for space, but space doesn't matter again. We could use an SSD, but we don't want that. We want an M.2. So we just filter for M.2. Let's not do that. Let's filter directly for what we want. We want the VP 4300s. And specifically we want the 2 TB version because it's faster than the 1 TB version, although at these speeds it doesn't matter at all. Any of these will do, but we want the fastest possible drive because when we restart the PC, this will determine how fast the operating system loads. Basically with these kinds of speeds it loads in an instant, in just a blink, and this also determines how fast programs will be installed. So the faster this is, the faster we install programs and the faster our restarts will become. This is extremely important in binning, and even here it's slightly important because at least it won't be annoying that we have to wait for anything. And this has 2 versions with graphene and aluminium heat shield. since I just like the aluminum one better, so we'll be using this one. And with that added, we have added everything we need from here. It will come up to a total of 3,400 and we'll buy it with same-day delivery. Another neat feature of IT expansion is that you can turn off shipment costs, so even same-day delivery will cost us nothing. And we ordered that, and it arrived instantly. We're not going to pick them up just yet, because first we'll go over the water cooling stuff too. So in the water cooling shop we want to buy 4 things. Let's begin with radiators. Radiators, we could just buy the 480s, just like I mentioned. This case can host 4 of these, but we're not going to do that, and the reason for that is because the core feature of radiators is that they provide CFM, cubic feet per minute. This is a measurement of the airflow that goes through them. So in a sense, cooling is measured by the airflow that the radiators or fans provide. And we want this CFM value to be as high as possible. Now, a 480 radiator gives us a CFM of 170. But in the same slot that we can put in a 480, we can also put in a 240 radiator. These numbers are just the length of the radiators. 240 means it has a length of 240 millimeters. And a 140 rad. And the weird thing is that a 140 rad provides us with a CFM of 90, and a 240 rad provides us with 110, or specifically this one 240 rad provides us with 120. So we have 90 plus 120, it provides us with 210 CFM compared to the 170 that we would get from a 4 length. So we're not doing this one, we're buying the small ones and putting them in appropriately. So yeah, what do we want? We want C240Ds. We want 4 of these. Then we want 140 rads, also 4. Let's just go with AKVB. And 120 rads, we want 2 of these, and we have RGB version, so we'll go with that. So 10 rads in total. This is the maximum this case can hold. This is the maximum that any case can hold in this game. So yeah, we added the radiators. Next up is reservoirs. For reservoirs, it doesn't really matter. I recommend using either the Alpha Cool small one or the Corsair small one, just so that if we're using longer GPUs, it doesn't interfere, and it also doesn't interfere with any radiators you put in the front or in the top. So I like this one most, XD3. We're gonna add 2 of these. We're gonna do 2 loops, not just one, so we need 2 reservoirs for that. CPU blocks. For CPU blocks, we want nothing much. We can go with RGB because we have a motherboard that can support that. We need AM4 sockets, and I just like how this 4Kiss Pro looks, so I'm gonna use that. And finally, water-cooled GPUs. For water-cooled GPUs, for this build specifically, we will be using a 3090. For the extreme overclock versions, specifically this 43K high score, you will want the 68000 Radeon. There is a 69000 version too, but the 68000, even if it's slightly older and weaker, if overclocked to the extreme, it will perform better. So for the high score, the absolute high score, you will want this one. But for us, it's a 3090, and this will perform better at the lower overclocks we will be doing here. And specifically, doesn't really matter that much, but these top 3 are pretty much the same except for length. and these can reach the best overclock, so we'll be picking one of these, specifically the reference for now, and two of these because we will be using two of these. You can check for multi-GPU on the GPU either here or the basic shop. It will write that if it uses SLI or Crossfire, and we will want one of those at least. And yeah, the length will always fit. Normally you'd have to check, but in this case, and everything fits. And we don't care about VRAM. We don't care at all. We basically don't care about core and memory frequency. Either we go by the part ranking score rather than this if we want to pick a better performing part in general, if not overclock. For extreme overclock, you'll just have to experiment and rely on others' experiences. So yeah, we have GPUs. We could also buy some appropriate pipes, connectors and coolants. I have already bought all of the available ones, so we don't need to go there. And we'll just buy this as well with 1-day delivery. So yeah, everything has arrived. We just take all of that, and the case is here. So we take all that, and then we can start assembly. We'll be looking at the assembly itself, then cables, pipes and coolants. So yeah, another reason why the NU is so good, that assembly is very easy in it. This is all you have to remove, and there is no PSU shroud, there's no other stuff you need to worry about. Okay. It's also important that you have the auto cable tool off by this time when you start the assembly, because otherwise you'll just be plugging in cable left and right, and we want a bit of control over that. We'll see later on. Okay, so motherboard and power supply is plugged in. The power supply is on the back, but you can install it just from right from the front. You don't need to turn the PC for that. Then it's CPU. Never ever forget thermal paste. This is important. Thermal paste needs to be applied every time that you put on, before you put on something to the CPU. If you put on something and take it off, you need to reapply thermal paste. Never forget paste. I can't emphasize this enough. Okay, for memory we'll just plunk in the two sticks. We have a nice motherboard that only has to, where you only have to open one of the, what's it called, memory clips. There isn't a bottom row, so that's nice. Okay, so we have these. We want the storage, well, not there, we want it here on the outside. Okay, and this is all we have in the basic shop. Then we go to custom water cooling. We drop down the block, we put in the GPUs, we put in the two reservoirs, and now comes the fun part. We start putting in the radiators. Okay, so, oh yeah, I had to take that out. Okay, so placement of these matters a little bit due to how daisy chaining works, which I'll show you in a minute when we start cabling. But there's also a very important part, this part in the front. The 240 radiator needs to go in the top every time, because this will be the only one that can clip through this bar here. The other radiators can't clip through, and thus you can't pipe to them. This will clip through just fine, and so this needs to go on the top. For the rest, it's best if they are on the left side. And yeah, auto screw just screws everything for us automatically, that's nice. And the last one here. Okay, then the 140s. Here in the back you can't install a 140 after this one, but you can install one here. And in the front, one just after the 240 ones. 140 there, and the 140 here in the front. Okay, and the two 120s go in the back, one after this one. This is still more cooling than a 480 would give you. And then one in the bottom. And this is more cooling than what a 360 would give you. So yeah, radiators uninstalled. Let's start cabling. For this we will select a red sleeved cable for the motherboard and CPU stuff. So motherboard connection, CPU connection, the case connection. Okay, for the GPU we'll go with green. Of course you can go with anything, I'm just doing this for visibility because this cabling and piping will become a hot mess in just a few minutes. So yeah, GPU cables, and the rest is all radiator and reservoirs. So okay, we're done here. Then what we want is switch back to the red cables and start plugging in stuff. We plug this in and we can see that we have 2 slots to plug it in. Well, if we want to plug this one in, we have 4 slots. Okay, and this one has 1 slot, and these are all the same 4 slots. So the top can go into 2 slots out of those 4. This can go into 1 out of those 4. This is why it's important to have a motherboard with enough headers slots. So yeah, we'll plug this one into here maybe, and then start the daisy chain. We'll plug this one into the previous one, and this one into that one, and this one into that one. So we already plugged in 4 radiators out of the 10 with just 1 motherboard connection. This is extremely important because we wouldn't have enough connections for all the radiators otherwise. So yeah, this one goes to the end of the... Let me just get rid of that. To this one, okay. And then this one goes there, and this one goes there, and this bottom one goes there. So you can do this daisy chain with just 1 connection. And the front ones will need to be plugged into the motherboard, and this one can be plugged into the previous one. And that's all 10 radiators plugged in. And then if we go to the... Actually we can change this cable to green just for consistency. So yeah, that's all 10 radiators plugged in. Okay, and then we plug in the reservoirs. And we'll see that we still have 2 slots for this. And this slot actually is the same as for the CPU cooler. So if we have an air cooler, we would need to plug this in. Water blocks don't need to be plugged in. That's a good thing. But if we would have an air block, we would have to plug that too, and that detracts from the number of headers we can use. So yeah, we'll plug this one in. This would be a green loop, but it doesn't matter because it doesn't change the color, so I don't need to change the color to this. This will be our red loop. And I'm just coloring it this way for you to see it more easily. Red will be everything related to CPU, and green will be everything related to the GPU. So okay, everything is cabled up. If we bring up this menu with tab, then we can see that we're still missing cables. Okay, what are we missing? What cable are we missing? Well, that can be right. Let's just plug this in again. Okay, now it's correct. It sometimes bugs out. So now we're only missing pipes. Okay, for piping we need to consider two aspects. One is the color of the pipe and the coolant. Oh, three aspects. One is the fitting, and one is if we're using flexible or rigid pipes. Flexible pipes are the easiest to use. I just select clear flexible pipe. Let's select the red fittings for this one, basic red fitting, and then we just go from one point to the next and it's done. With rigid pipes you have much more control over it, but it's also much more bothersome to actually make all the bends and make all the pipes work, but it will look much more nicely in the end. We don't care about how this looks, so we'll just go with the flexible pipes. And of course you will want to choose the pipe and the coolant color that you wish to see. We'll just go with red for this loop, so transparent pipe and red coolant. And for the other loop we'll use the green fitting. And okay, so how this works is we go from the reservoir to the GPU, from this GPU to the other GPU. We don't mind these four connectors. These can remain unconnected as long as the GPU is properly connected to exactly one other part. Okay, so where do we go with this one? Let's go, I don't know, top side, and then to the back. And that was not too inspired, so just to make it a little bit better looking, we're gonna go there. Oh, damn it. Yeah, this one, then this one, then this goes down here, and this goes down. I'll do it like this, and this goes to the front. So let's bring it up here and bring this down here. So as you can see, we're just going continuously through all of the radiators. It's important to hit every one of them if you want them to be included in the loop, and also hit everything only once, because GPUs could be hit twice in theory. In practice it won't let me connect it, but yeah, we don't want to connect it to two parts. No, I mean we want to connect it to exactly two parts, so one out and one in, or one in and one out. Out and in doesn't matter, so the order of this whole thing does not matter at all. I just did this arbitrarily. I just have to make sure that everything connects fine. Yeah, and everything does not connect fine here. Okay, we'll do then. Let's remove this one and pipe that one to that one, and then we'll remove this one to include the front ones. So we'll go down here and go up here, and that's done. Everything's properly connected. Status changes to empty loop. So all we have to do is press install, go to coolant, and I want opaque green for this loop, and I want opaque UV red for this loop. Now I won't be waiting for the whole loop to fill up, because this will otherwise take some time. I will be doing a little trick. I take the PC, I put it in storage, go to the end of storage, pick up the PC, put it back down, and the loops are magically filled up. So yeah, that's a neat little trick you can do to fill up loops faster. Okay, and then we just put in the parts that were taken off. What is this? Back side. This is the front, and this is the top. Okay. So it has changed to no OS installed. So we basically finished assembling the computer. Everything is cabled, everything is piped, loop is filled, and then we can start with the settings. Now these settings will be what provide us with a good 3D Mark score. So we might as well just add the programs we need. We'll just add system info for fun. We don't need shop, we don't need 3D Mark. So this on this, and this for fun. And this is needed, and OCCT is needed. Okay, the rest are don't matter right now. Especially these one from down here, from document to Fall Guys. These are all just for career mode. They are not useful in the slightest when building PCs, just for scores. So yeah, another neat trick here is that you don't restart the PC, you power it off and on quickly by pressing P, and then you can skip that black screen that appears when restarting. Okay, so now let's start with BIOS settings. Let me just check what we need to set. We're here, BIOS 214 times 23. Okay. And let's just look at this real quickly. Here you can check the memory channels. So it says 2 out of 2. So 2 memory channels used out of the 2 maximum. As I said, this is CPU specific. So you want this to be the same number. So 4 out of 4, 2 for 2. And yeah, the rest is on the other pages. We don't care about RAM capacity at all. So let's go to CPU overclock. As I said, we always want to set the CPU to at least 1.7. Every single CPU. And you can check in the table that I provided below for the specific voltage that the CPU you're trying to use can always reach, will always be safe. And for this we want a base clock and ratio set to specific values. As you can see, as I set my base clock to a different value, actually let's not do that first, the CPU speed changes. This is because the CPU speed is basically this times this. So at 100 at 49 it will be 4900. If we lower this, it will lower accordingly. But as long as the base clock is at the basic value of 100, we can go to RAM and enable XMP. And this will set, if you remember, the motherboard's rated RAM speed was 4733. So this sets, XMP sets the RAM to be overclocked at that specific speed. Now we don't want to use XMP, but a neat little trick here is that we can check the RAM steps here, because the RAM steps will be the possible values here when the CPU is set to 100. So the lowest is this, and then this is the specific one that we want. And then of course we have a RAM step of 4733, which you saw earlier. If it didn't have this one, only the previous one, for example, then it would have set the XMP would have set the RAM to this one. So it always sets it to a valid RAM step. And this is also the highest. Okay. So in RAM we will want a step of 2667 and a voltage of, as I said again, 1.8. Every single RAM will hit this voltage. I will also link another guide that deals with RAM voltages and RAM speeds that are safe. And this RAM speed changes based on the RAM step and the base clock. So if I raise the base clock, you can see that it's no longer 2667, it will be raised. So we want a base clock, and this is the clickety-click part. Why I chose this specific setup, I don't know. We will want 214 if I remember correctly. So yeah, 214, and obviously this is a way too high CPU speed, so we'll bring it down to, what was it, 23 I guess. We'll bring it down to a CPU speed of 4922 I believe. So yeah, we're approaching 23, and yeah. So the safe speed for this specific CPU is 4958. So this is well within the margin. And for the RAM it is 5708, which is safe, and we're again within this margin. So everything checks out. This is the overclock we want, 214 times 23 with a voltage of 170 and 5707 at a voltage of 180. If you're using a different motherboard and you can't set it to this specific RAM speed, then you need to swap the motherboard. Okay, and we apply the changes and restart. And now that the PC has started, we can start doing the overclocking from here, and we'll need to set the GPU settings. For GPU we always max out the voltage, and for core clock, what were the values again? Let's see, 2240 and 2133. So 2240, yeah, and 2133. Am I right? Double check. Yeah, okay. So this is the value for this 3090 that will always work. This will never give us a blue screen. Well, except for temperature. If we have temperature problems, this needs about a CFM of 450-ish, as I calculated, but we have well over 900, so no problem. Apply. You need to press apply, nothing happens seemingly. Of course the temperatures here jump up right now, and that's good. Then we have it set correctly. We can run a quick OCCT. This is not necessary, since if we set everything correctly, then we won't have any blue screens. Everything will be fine. I'm sweating. Yeah, everything is fine. And there's a weird quirk where we have so much cooling that temperatures actually go down from the value that it had previously, 28. But yeah, it just shows that it's fine. And yeah, we're basically done. We'll just run this for a neat little trick and leave it there in the background, and then we can run 3D Mark to see what score we get. Well, I can tell you the exact score we will get is 39,767, and this will be the score you get with these settings every time without a blue screen. You can just build it. Silicon lottery is not a thing with this build, so it will be okay. The reason we why system information previously is because then we have this cute overview of the temperatures and the wattage, which we don't need at all, but I guess it's nice that it's a feature. The power consumption won't ever reach more than, I guess, about 1500, but during the test I guess it will be reaching about, yeah, just below 800, 700 and something. And yeah, we got the score of 39,767. So that's all for this build. Now, what can you do to further progress? Well, you can actually overclock this build better, since obviously we are assuming that it has a 0SL, but obviously it won't be having a 0SL. It will be having a higher, possibly much higher silicon lottery value, and with that you can overclock this build way better. So for this PC that I threw together in advance, I actually set the silicon lottery values to 0, just to show you that even if I set it just one little smidgen higher and apply it, the moment I run, well, no, 3D Mark will actually run CPU tests, so it will take longer. The moment I run OCCT and the 5 seconds initial warm-up passes, it will blue screen instantly. Yeah, and this is due to not having enough voltage. So this is what happens when you have zero silicon lottery value and you try to overclock over the safe values. Of course, I can just restart the PC, set it back to the safe values, and then it will work, no problem. And the same thing with CPU. If I set it here to any voltage or speed, also for RAM, that's higher than this one, the rated safe ones, then it will just blue screen. So yeah, but the other PC, we just bought these parts, so they are completely random. We can just boldly go into GPU tuner and set it. I will boldly go with 2250. Yeah, let's be brave. And yeah, I have no problem here. Okay, so we run OCCT and it will probably not crash, hopefully. Yeah, so this can still tolerate higher voltages and temperatures. We just did this 39,000, I can never say it, 39,767 score, because this is the highest you can do with zero binning any part, even if they have zero silicon lottery, they can reach this score. But realistically, anything you put together here will reach a higher score if you set the values higher. So yeah, you can start and overclock this, or you can build the previously mentioned setup with the 3960. You'll need 2 more RAMs of the same type, and this is best with the Alpha 2 motherboard. If you build it, you'll see which one it is. For TRX, you need a different motherboard for TRX, STRX 4 sockets. And yeah, you can try to build that one for the score of 19,994, and from then on, try to overclock the GPU to reach a high score with that one too. CPU score is just a lower priority regarding 3D Mark score, but it can, if it's too low, it can still drag down the score significantly. So optimizing both CPU and GPU is recommended. So yeah, you can go ahead and try some more extreme overclocking for this. Maybe check out other videos on YouTube about binning and more extreme overclocking, or you can, if you haven't already, you can go ahead and build this PC in your own game and then brag about having a high score of over 39,000. Actually, you only need a little push and it can reach 40,000. So 40,000 is easily reachable with this, even this build. So yeah, thanks for watching, hope you liked it. Please like and subscribe, comment if you have any questions. Make sure to answer everything appropriately. And see you again, hopefully, in another video.